Chris Hines has spent decades challenging the status quo. He's gone from battling raw sewage to advising national institutions, all while finding time to be with nature and go surfing. This is a story of resilience, real change, and why one man still believes that we can do better. I'm Curly Steve, and we're searching for a greener room. Co-founder of Surfers Against Sewage, former sustainability director at the Eden Project, founder of A Grain of Sand, and proud MBE holder, which in his words stands for Moaning Bloody Environmentalist. He's been campaigning for over 35 years, always with humour, honesty and sharp-eyed pragmatism. Today we're diving into the power of protest, the importance of communication and the character it takes to stay the course when knockbacks come hard and fast. Chris, welcome to the show.
Delighted to be here.
Delighted that you're here. So let's just rewind. Can you tell me where your environmental journey started, and tell me a little bit about where your surfing started as well?
So I was born, I'm 63 now. I was born in Plymouth, grew up on the edge of Dartmoor, went to a big comprehensive school there, but I was always out in the natural environment. I could just open the gate and walk out onto Dartmoor. And my parents always used to encourage that. They took us to the beach. We had all of our holidays in Cornwall when I was a kid. So that kind of love of the natural environment was there very early. My dad was and mum were kind of keen on natural history and lots of books around that kind of stuff. And then surfing, we used to holiday at places like Widmouth and Sennin. Never used to go far. So that was kind of there. So I had a wooden belly board when I was probably 4 or 5 years old. And then actual surfboard, I kind of borrowed my brother's when I was 11, maybe 12. That's when I first took in, and it was a big old 10'6" Bilbo beast. And I kind of, lugged it around, and that's where that kind of started. And then when I was a year older than that, I saved up and bought a £20 second-hand board and an old diving suit with the old kind of beaver tail coming through. That's where it all started. Excellent.
So your main surfing spots you started within Cornwall?
It would have been Widmouth,
mm-hmm.
Polzeth. Mm-hmm. Polzeth, a very different place now.
Very different.
Compared to what it was back then. Mm-hmm. But also places like Tregantle Fort on the south coast in Whitsand Bay, and even places like Loo, when that breaks, very rarely. Those two areas really.
Awesome. So tell me, you spending time on Dartmoor and spending time around in the ocean, that's where your interest in the environment came in?
Yeah, just a kind of a love of it, I guess. If you're spending a lot of time out in the natural environment, you have a respect for it, but also you gain an understanding of it, and you do go, wow, this is amazing, and how lucky are we to be here? How lucky am I to be looking at all of this? I mean, even things like, I can remember, it was like I was still at primary school, but I kind of got off the school bus and was walking home kind of through the 200-300 yards of edge of Dartmoor bit to the house. And there was like a 6-legged horse. But what that actually was it was a Dartmoor pony giving birth.
Ah, wow.
And I just kind of ran home to my mum, got my mum, and we kind of like sat kind of 50 yards away, and I watched that happen. Mm-hmm. And that's quite a magical thing to see that, really.
Especially in nature.
Yeah. And the little foal got up and wobbled around and stood and took its first kind of teetering steps. So seeing things like that make you go, wow, and make you want to learn more about it and appreciate what it is, what you're part of. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's where that kind of connection came from with the natural environment.
So you started Surfers Against Sewage around the 80s?
1990.
1990. So what in between school and 1990, what was happening for you then?
So I completely fluffed all my A-levels.
Right.
Too busy going surfing and took completely the wrong subjects. But don't despair, anybody out there.
Yeah.
Your moment will come somewhere in life.
Absolutely.
But I'd been writing some words, and there was a new surfing magazine that had come out, a surf magazine called Surf Scene. And I sent them this bit of fiction that I'd written about surfing. And on the basis of that, they said, come down and have the interview. And then that summer, age 19, I got to go out and interview Rabbit Bartholomew, Sean Thompson, Shane Horan, and then turn those into little articles which were published. And then that winter after that, I was given a initial 8 weeks of work, and then that became 2 years, and I became assistant editor. But there wasn't enough money. This is a measure of where surfing was. There wasn't enough money to pay me enough to be able to afford a vehicle and a place to live.
Right.
So I had to live in my van for the first 6 months, which I did at kind of Porthtown and around. It was very easy then because there weren't many people camping in vans, and I had a kind of good network. So that's what I did for the first 6 months, and then I managed to afford a caravan. They put me up by £10. So I lived in a static caravan for about 7 years then. So I did that for a couple of years, and then I was a brickies labourer, went to Australia, went down, did the classic Morocco trip, went to Imswan when there was only 10 people in the water. That was a crowded day.
Yeah.
But then went and did a year's working holiday in Australia, and then came back in kind of 88, end of 88, and then 89, and then 1990 we formed.
So what was the catalyst there? What made you... do you remember the day when you decided that you needed to do something?
It's 35 years ago, pretty much to the day that we're doing this. So we had our first meeting behind closed doors on the 26th of April.
Who's we?
And that was a bunch, probably about a dozen of us in the Porthtown St Agnes surf community. And we've been seeing kind of an increase in panty liners and condoms. We knew the sewage was bad. And I think the presence of the panty liners made it really obvious. So ironically, this kind of plastic item. And we'd been seeing it quite a lot the year before. And then that spring, that kind of end of winter, early spring, there was a couple of people wanted to spray a bit of graffiti. Someone had come up with the name, Andrew Kingsley Tubbs, better known as Ange. He'd come up with the name, Surfers Against Sewage, and SAS and the military kind of connotation of that. But so there was kind of there was an angle about let's spray some graffiti, do that. And then there were a few of us who were going, no, if we're going to do this, we should do something a little bit more serious because that won't achieve anything. So we called a meeting up at Minzy's house, at Minzy's mum's house, and there was about a dozen people there. And we committed to have our first public meeting 2 weeks later in St Agnes in the kind of one of the village halls there. And that was held on the 10th of May 1990. And we went to there. I got the science brief and the health brief because my dad was a doc, so I had to take that on. But when we walked in there, we'd had a little bit of coverage on Radio Cornwall, and you couldn't get in. There was over 200 people. There were people leaning in through the windows. We signed up members at £2 a hit. We didn't really know why. In fact, we did. We thought we might be able to afford a sewage treatment.
Oh, there you go.
But very rapidly.
For £2 each?
Yeah, for about £2 each. But we quite quickly found out that they were several million. So that wasn't going to work at all. But yeah, so off we went, really. That was... And very quickly. So most of our campaigning that summer was in Cornwall. But then... once we'd put our hands up and our heads above the parapet, everybody from around the UK, started going, you think you've got it bad? You come and have a look at this. So we were surfing in Camborne and Redruth sewage. That's what we were surfing in. The combined 5 million gallons of completely crude sewage every single day.
And can I just stop you there? I remember those days, and it literally was
raw.
things in the sea. You were swimming past tampons, condoms, cigarette butts, shit, the whole...
Everything. I mean, back then, there was a quote in 1989 at the privatisation of the water industry. Margaret Thatcher, who was Prime Minister at the time, stated, and I quote, "All sewage is treated before discharge." And she said that on BBC. The reality was 400 million gallons of completely crude sewage every single day from Newquay to Newcastle, Brighton to Blackpool. There were no sewage treatment works at all. So, we're sat in Newquay now, and there is a sewage treatment works, and it gets bypassed when the storms kick in and everybody throws their hands up in horror. Back in 1990, there wasn't a sewage treatment works. Everybody who flushed their toilet in Newquay would literally discharge straight out of the end of the headland. And that was the same right around the coast of the UK. It was a kind of national disgrace, and our tourist industry denied it. They were playing the game, as in the book and the film Jaws. Let's not tell anybody about the great white shark, because we'll scare off the tourists. Our problem wasn't great white; it was great brown turd. That was our problem.
And that was one of your images, wasn't it, of the great big inflatable turd that you took out there?
Yeah. We had a 10-foot inflatable turd. We never actually did even launch it in Newquay, although everybody said that we did. The councillors were always freak about it. We never launched it, but just the threat of launching it was enough.
When we were chatting the other day, Chris had just shown a film and it had the big turd there, and I said, I saw that in Paynton, and it was actually in Paynton that you had floated it out, wasn't it?
Yeah,
and
I
was stood on the beach
at
35 years ago at that time, which was quite a thing. So what was the process? What was Surfers Against Sewage doing what did they start doing?
So that kind of first year, I guess, we just protested about it. So we raised the profile that this was happening. We went to the Houses of Parliament within 10 months of forming. We formed in May 1990. In March 1991, we went to the Houses of Parliament. We had a lobby. We were in our wetsuits and gas masks and everything. We pulled the Secretary of State for the Environment, a guy called David Trippier. That's the equivalent of Stephen Reed in today's currency. And we pulled him in front of camera, in front of a Channel 4 documentary and other news channels. And the Labour and Lib Dem spokesman as well for the environment. And the day we got there, the Minister, David Trippier, announced £2 million spend on research into the health effects of bathing in sewage-contaminated seawater. So even though we didn't know what we were doing and it was scary as hell, the very act of stepping forward helped trigger that piece of research.
For sure, because this kind of activism had never happened before.
Definitely not in surfing. And I think this was, I kind of refer to it as intelligent activism. And, activism to make change happen. You can't be an activist just for the sake of being an activist.
Right.
I don't get that. We wanted to win. That was what we wanted, clean seas. That was our aim. We just wanted to be able to go and enjoy the sea for the wonderful thing that it is. And
which isn't too much to ask.
No, that's not. But we kind of quite rapidly worked out that just protesting, that's the easy bit, really. We don't want this shout. So we had to so we knew our aim, clean seas. We knew the problem, 400 million gallons of crude sewage. How do you create that all those multiple pressure points for change? Over that period of time, we did politics, we did the media really well. One of our members even used to write scripts for BBC Casualty. So there was a 15-minute BBC Casualty went out. They couldn't say the words Surfers Against Sewage. It was our story, our sweatshirts, our T-shirts.
Amazing.
14 million viewers on a Saturday night. We did science. We had our mouths sucked and our veins sucked, proving that surfers 3 times more likely to contract hepatitis A than the general public. We bought shares in every water company. That gave us the right to go to their annual general meetings and challenge them. How
did that go?
Oh, they loathed us.
Yeah, for sure.
And it was very. There was a brilliant one in Brighton where we wanted to. So we owned shares in Southern Water, and myself and a guy called Andrew Coleman Tim Mining, was his nickname. We had a toilet seat that we wanted to award to the chairman to put around his neck for being the shittiest water company in the UK. And we got him pinned down in the AGM afterwards, and we were running all the way around, and everybody had gone off to the reception after the annual general meeting, and he was trying to get out, but we were kind of running around with the media to all the different entrances, and they eventually kind of smuggled him out. But the key thing was we did used to affect share prices. You know, we used to be consulted by people like BBC Breakfast News, Business Section, and appear on there as to which water companies were a risk and which ones were kind of leaning into doing the right things.
You were everywhere.
We were, yeah. I mean, SAS is a collective tribe. And at that time, you know, this was kind of pre-internet pretty much, really. But we would go anywhere in the UK if we knew there was a pressure point to be applied and pushed on. We would go anywhere in the UK within 24 hours, whether that be media or a kind of a demonstration or a council meeting or whatever. We would go and we would, you know, just chuck the turd in the car, the inflatable turd, gas masks, wetsuits, and that allows you to protest. Because the picture, and the one you referenced, the one taken in Paynton, that is enough to convey the message. You don't have to have mass rallies, and you can condense the story into one image really strongly. And then with the science or whatever it is that you do. We also work with a brilliant law company, Lee Day & Co., one of the kind of leading environmental and social lawyers in the UK, law firms. We successfully judicially reviewed one of the Cornish councils at the time, with two brilliant young women, Sarah and Rachel, and we judicially reviewed the council and set case precedent for the whole of the UK.
What does that mean?
So the council, so we knew that there were panty liners and condoms all over Porthtowan Beach. We used to call Porthtown Porth Tampon, just for the record. Yeah. And we went to the council and said, look, here's section 79E of the Environmental Protection Act 1990. It says that if there's an accumulation or a deposit prejudicial to health or a nuisance, you shall, no question, issue an abatement notice to stop against the offender, in this case South West Water.
Okay.
So we asked the council to do that, and they basically turned around and went, go to hell, you're a bunch of surfers, we don't need to take any notice of you. So with Sarah and Rachel as the two plaintiffs, and it was in their name, the case, we went to the Royal Courts of Justice in London, we judicially reviewed, and the judge said to Carrick District Council, no, you shall issue the abatement notice, you're in law, you're wrong. And then that applied to all the councils all the way around the UK because it had never been tested. We did the test with Sarah and Rachel and Lee Day & Co. And then that meant every council had to make the water companies at least apply even a basic screen, which then makes them build sewage treatment works, which triggers on. We also had to go and find a solution. Shall I just keep...
Yeah, keep going.
So the water companies at the time as well, they wanted to build long sea outfalls. This was their solution to everything, just pump it further out to sea. But what that meant was that the things that they were testing for, called fecal coliforms and total, they die off rapidly in salt water, a matter of hours, possibly a couple of days. Hepatitis A can do 100 days in salt water, especially if it's like wrapped up in a nice nugget of fatty poo. The natural UV and the salt can't get to it.
Right.
So an absence of these indicator organisms was no guarantee that the water was clean. So we had to find a solution to this, like that was done. And we looked high and low. And there were some water companies were starting to do a little bit, but Jersey was the real standout one. And they'd not built a long sea outfall. They put in this thing called ultraviolet light disinfection, like harnessed sunlight. So primary, secondary treatment, and then zap it with UV tubes. And then the bacterial count in their outfall pipe was 50 times cleaner than the government standard for a past beach. So I was called up to London to give evidence to Parliament in front of a select committee. And they asked me about this, and I said, they said, how confident are you? And my response was, based on the bacterial count in Jersey's outfall pipe compared to beaches such as, Porth Tampon or, Fistral or wherever, I would feel 50 times safer sticking my head up Jersey's outfall pipe than I would bathing on those beaches.
Wow.
A week after I made that statement, the island of Jersey went, phoned us up and they went, this would make really good marketing material for us. So over I went and I duck dived into the mouth of 100,000 people's sewage. And I got about a metre up the pipe before I was blown back out with a force.
Incredible.
But I stand by what I said, look, taste and smell cleaner than the beaches that we were bathing on. And it was £9 million cheaper than building the Long Sea Outfall.
So as well as that being fantastic marketing for the Channel Islands, it was also fantastic marketing for Surfers Against Sewage.
Yeah, and we'd found the solution, and that's a hard thing to go off and find. And that helped change the whole way that the water company, their whole massive capital investment programme, hundreds of millions of pounds were going to be spent doing something, and they wanted to just pump it further out to sea, and we changed that. We were part of the crew who helped change that. There were the manufacturers and the researchers, and then Dŵr Cymru Welsh Water were the first water company to adopt a full sewage treatment works with UV for everything, and they abandoned Long Sea Outfalls, and we cut the ribbon at their first UV treatment works, and it's Surfers Against Sewage's name on that brass plaque.
That's incredible.
Mm.
That's some great work.
Mm.
And so that kept you busy for how long? How long were you with Surfers Against Sewage?
I was there for 10 years.
And that was intelligent conversation and activism,
Yeah.
and more and more and more.
Yeah.
And that just kept you busy for 10 years. And it obviously still going now after 35 years and still doing some great work.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing that SAS are there. It's sad that they still got to be there, but SAS will always have to be there. There's always going to be people trying to kind of mess with our oceans and our marine environment. And, it's an incredible thing that what started out as such a almost, we didn't even think we would make 6 months, and here we are 35 years later. Sadly, the water companies have gone, backwards. 14 years of kind of very weak legislation and very weak monitoring and things. 50% cut to the Environment Agency funding. Mm-hmm. The water companies have gone backwards.
And is it a different problem now than it was then, or is it the same problem?
They're basically bypassing the sewage treatment works. So at times there's completely crude sewage being discharged again, which is just unacceptable. If they'd kept building on the basis that they had, so these first-time sewage treatment works were built everywhere. Mm-hmm. So every city and town and village went from having no sewage treatment works to having a sewage treatment works at a high level of treatment. And then everybody just took their foot off the gas, they took their eye off the ball, and the water companies literally looked around and went, no one's watching, and they undid their belts, they pulled their trousers down, and they started pooping in the sea again.
Yeah. And so what are your thoughts on shareholder dividends and things like that? Is this a problem that?
Yeah, I mean, what happened then was that, most of the money that has been paid has gone out of the country. So our water companies are owned by, like Macquarie. There's a company in Australia that owns large chunks, and so the money has been paid in dividends and it's gone. It's not even in the UK anymore. When the water companies were first privatised, all the money did go to shareholders in the UK through pension funds. So a lot of people's pension funds will be invested in things like water companies and other utilities as well.
Because they're fairly safe, aren't they?
Yeah, they're safe bets. People have got no choice. It's a monopoly. Mm. You have to pay for your water, and there's only one water company, so it's guaranteed level of income. Mm. But yeah, we've seen shocking levels of shareholder payouts, and the salaries are just eye-watering, aren't they?
Incredible,
for not doing a very good job.
Yeah. So what do you think? What's next?
Well, there's currently a commission on water, on the water industry and sewage contamination of our seas and rivers. Hopefully that will drive some positive change. I know SAS have been, I was with Giles a couple of days ago, who's the new chief exec of Surfers Against Sewage, and yeah, they're pressing a lot of the right buttons and they're being listened to. There's a lot of public outrage at it. So it feels like the water companies should be the whipping they need to take a cut here. They need to be, whether or not they renationalise them, I don't know. I don't know the economics of that deeply enough. But I think if I was Steve Reed, the Secretary of State for the Environment, I'd pick off the worst 2 water companies and I'd renationalise them. And then that would send out like a very clear indicator to the others as to you either change your ways or you'll be next.
Yeah.
And I think it needs a major overhaul, and probably it needs to go back into kind of like a community interest company. Interestingly, and I know they're still not the best water company necessarily. They're still a water company, but Dŵr Cymru Welsh Water is a not-for-profit. It's owned by the people of Wales. It's a community interest company.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It?
So why can't we have that for Southwest? Why can't we have that for Southern and all the other water companies?
Because there's too much money in it at the moment.
Yeah, but those are changes that probably need to happen.
Yeah. Interesting. So, moving on, you then went to Eden.
Yeah, I took a year out and recharged batteries and things for sure.
I bet 10 years of that was exhausting.
Yeah, you it's hard graft because you're there to do a good job, and that was kind of the 12, 14 of us against 10 private water companies, a government, and all those other things, and
and looking after, what was it, 18,000
members, 18,000 paid up members. Yeah, we were completely independently funded. We weren't a charity at the time. And I did find it recently because someone challenged me about that, but I did find the letter we wrote to the Charities Commission saying, can we be a charity? And they went, you're way too political. Yeah. The charitable laws have changed. So that's kind of allowed SAS to become a charity now, and they can still have that age. But
So you were run entirely by member contributions?
Member contributions, T-shirts, sweatshirts, a couple of good donations from the industry, and the ball.
Yeah. Those were always fun.
Yeah, those were always good fun. And it's great to see Surfers Against Sewage 35th anniversary ball this year. I bought my tickets.
There you go.
I bought mine. So yeah.
Good on you.
No, I wasn't going to take any complimentary ones. So,
fair play. Oh, good on you. So tell me about. So you had a little break, and then you went to Eden. Tell me about that.
So Eden behind the scenes. So Eden, when it opened, was lovely, shiny. Here we are. We're this sustainable environmental project, but behind the scenes, they hadn't got any waste management facilities whatsoever. So I designed the kind of this concept waste neutral, and then on a Friday afternoon, so whilst I was designing that and kind of trying to build the infrastructure behind it, I'd put on my dirty jeans and go out and get covered in bin juice and sort all the recycling into things. And then we built this system there. But I was there as sustainability director, trying to encourage them to do more of the right thing and build relationships out into that kind of wider world, but specifically around waste and the materials that we do.
And you introduced the triple bottom line.
The triple bottom line, yeah. So triple bottom line, John Elkington, one of my absolute heroes and someone I'm very privileged to call a friend. And I first met John. So John wrote the first Green Consumer Guide back in 1987. And in about 92, he coined this phrase, triple bottom line thinking. And I'd met him. He wrote another book called Holidays That Don't Cost the Earth. And he asked me to the book launch of that, which was in a Turkish bath in London. Right. And I had to put my wetsuit on in a Turkish bath, and I was just dripping. Yeah, it was so hot. But I did that kind of, and that's when I met John. And he had this phrase, triple bottom line thinking, this concept. And that's, we've lived in a world where we just make money. And that's the only bottom line anybody's interested in. But you have to take into account, to run a successful business, you have to take into account the economic. You have to be profitable and make some money and keep viable in that way. But you also have to have your social and environmental elements as well. And the best example that we did at the Eden project of triple bottom line thinking was we put in a dishwasher. So when I first went to Eden, every single plate, fork, cup, etc., all was single use. They were brown, they looked eco, but it was just a con. They were going straight to landfill, one use. And we looked at the triple bottom line of putting in a dishwasher with crockery and cutlery. And environmentally, we reduced our landfill by 8 tonnes a year. We reduced the material and carbon impact of manufacture and transportation to us. Socially, we created 2 jobs because someone had to load the dishwasher. People got a nicer cup of tea because it was in a china cup.
Absolutely.
And we didn't see it coming, but on the day we launched, we suddenly started selling loads of salad because people could put it on, it wasn't on a wobbly plate, so they could have, so diet went up as well. And then economically, we sold more tea, we sold more salad, and we saved ourselves about 149,000 over a 5-year
So
time frame.
isn't that just a superb message and a great metaphor for how we can all be a little bit better with something so simple as just a dishwasher? Solve is an SEO and web design agency that builds high quality, sustainable websites and strategies to help businesses grow online. They're also B Corp, meaning they're a business for good, making a positive impact while driving real results. As a special offer for our listeners, Solve is offering a free website audit and consultation. Just mention searching for a greener room to claim yours. So how did you roll that out to the other areas, the other aspects of the Eden project?
So we did half-day workshops for all of the 650 staff, and you had to be there. You weren't allowed not to go to those workshops. And we ended up at one point or other, I can remember the kind of security team kind of very much arms crossed going, oh, what's this got to do with us? And then a couple of months later, they were buying a new set of radios for doing the security at Eden. And they said, can you pop down to the security office and come and see us? And they'd done the triple bottom line analysis of buying a new set of radios. And they were very pleased because they'd got an extra 2 channels on the radios, which allowed them to be looking after people better. There was a dedicated emergency channel. And environmentally, they'd got a more, the batteries could be better at recharging, and they at the end of the life of that system, the company would take the whole lot back.
Perfect.
And it was a little bit more expensive, about £1,000 on a £30,000 expenditure. But on the basis of that, they got the go-ahead from the finance director. And that showed me that you can apply that kind of thinking to whatever it is that you do. Yeah, and it's just taking that balance of things, you know, making it count in all areas. Yeah.
Awesome. So Eden came to an end.
For me, yeah.
And that was that when you started A Grain of Sand?
Yeah, I did a couple of years just as myself, but I didn't like being called Chris Hines.
Right.
Org, whatever you call that. I kind of, so I called it A Grain of Sand, and it is me pretty much. But I'll go and work with lots of people, anyone who wants to really. And it's about, you know, a grain of sand, small, irritating, but out comes the odd pearl in relation to an oyster. But it's also that kind of collective of there's millions of grains of sand on the beach and there's millions, billions of us. And if we all make a little difference, that builds up and counts to a big difference.
Definitely.
And again, you can be quite agile as a grain of sand as well. You can go where you need to go.
So what's the sort of purpose of A Grain of Sand?
To work with organisations and individuals who want to make a difference, who want to try and kind of go down that line of delivering a more positive future. I think one of our biggest challenges that we face is that we don't sell the vision enough. We don't go, this is our world over here. I mean, we're talking on a day where we've just had a big change in terms of our politics. Reality is you know, only 17% of the people in Runcorn actually voted for reform. So that's tiny, really. That's only 17%. That isn't true democracy, which was a brilliant album by Steel Pulse. But it's about how we can kind of make those changes, and we collectively if I can, so I mean, I do all kinds of talks to all kinds of people. Last week I chaired, I did a talk and hosted the awards for a vinyl flooring recycling scheme that has 66 different outlets across the UK where you may, anybody who is taking out old vinyl flooring can take it back to that company and it all gets recycled. And there was someone there from the European Commission and they were saying, this is amazing. This is a brilliant leading project. And they've done 7,500 tons of vinyl floor recycling. And I think that these are all going on all at the same time. That's vinyl flooring, which sounds like that's boring. What's that? Surfers Against Sewage. Well, it's lovely and sexy and everything and fun and engaging, and vinyl flooring pretty boring. But those guys and girls are doing really good things, and that's there in every single sector.
Yeah, for sure.
And there's this brilliant project that's just been launched by The Guardian called the 89% Project. And I heard of this research about a year and a half ago. And the research showed they interviewed 130,000 people from over 100 countries around the world. 89% of all people interviewed said that climate change was a real issue, really important, and the number one, and they wanted their governments to do more about it. 85% said they would gladly spend 1% or more on taxation to address climate crisis. But they all thought they were in the minority. And so if that's just that, so this project that's been launched by The Guardian called the 89% Project, and I've just had 89, the logo sprayed on my new eco surfboard that's just been made.
By Otter?
This one's a cord, but it's going to have a sustainable surf gold logo, so it's a polyol blank, eco sap resin. I think I might even be able to get fins made that are filled with sheep's wool. This is what we're chasing in. Anyway, but love James and James Otter. But the 89% Project is about making people understand, metaphorically, we are the 89%. So the strongest thing that we can all do is go, I am one of the 89%.
Yeah.
And that applies, I think, across the board to 89% of us do want a positive future. We do want people respected. We do want our planet respected. And in the words of Joe Cox, the MP, we all have more in common than divides us. And it feels at times like some of the more divisive social media and all of that is just wedging us apart. But if you put us all, on the beach together as 100,000 people or 1 million grains of sand, we would all go, yeah, we'll have a slice of that good life.
Well, that was the strength of Surfers Against Sewage, wasn't it? The amount of people you had as a community saying the same thing.
Yeah, and everybody else going, yeah, they're right, aren't they? Of course we don't want to bathe in sewage.
What do you think the biggest social or environmental challenge for us is right now?
Misinformation and disinformation.
Absolutely.
So we're being told, which kind of comes off what I was just saying then about the 89% project. We're being told that this isn't the case and that we can't have the solutions and that we can't deliver that better world where, and the reality is there's going to be a little bit of pain. The pain is going to be for the super rich and they don't want to let go. Of course they don't.
And there's too many people interested to keep them going.
Yes, but it's not, I'm staggered that we don't tax. And in fact, there's even a campaign, isn't there, Millionaires for More Tax or something, where people are saying, no, do tax us. We're the super rich. We want to be, taxed. This myth that we can't do it, and we need to make that equitable. And there was this, there's a staggering one. We've just let everything run away from us, and no one needs to earn 1,000 times or 269 times what anybody else earns.
You can't spend that money.
No. How many pairs of jeans do you need to put on?
Yeah. And so I was in London earlier this week at a conference, and there was lots of politicians there. There was lots of big business there. There was, they were talking millions, billions, trillions. It was all about the money. It was an environmental conference. And people were saying the right things. People were saying things that you sat there and went, yes, this is good. And then you look at the credentials behind and it's not quite so good. So how do you know someone's telling the truth? How do you know what you're reading is the truth? How do you know what you're reading from a scientist isn't being paid by
fact check?
Yeah, do you know what
check,
I mean?
dig in, find out who they are.
Yeah.
Find out, you can go in and do that. It's a bit more work than believing Brian on Faceache.
that's the problem, isn't it?
And that's where a load of people get their kind of media from. And there was a brilliant one, a friend of mine, Dave and I were doing a bit of work on the house, and we had put some scaffolding up. And during that time, someone asked me something, and they said, "Oh no, I've read this," and I said, "Well, yeah, but the MHI doesn't say that." And I live in a village called Mount Hawke, between Mount Hawke and Porthtowan. Mm-hmm. And this person completely changed their opinion because I told them something, and it was a complete lie. I just invented something and said, but the MHI say that. And they went, oh, crikey. And I said, you haven't even asked me what the MHI is. And they said,
the Mount Hawke?
It's the Mount Hawke Institute. So this was just my mate Dave and me up the scaffold. And they just went, oh, no. And I said, yeah, but you don't, who are these people? Check out who they are.
Yeah.
If someone publishes something, go and find the website and then look at about. And if you can't find anything that says about and gives you the history of who those people are and where they qualified and what they're, then don't believe it. We can do that. It's like it's really okay to do so. And again, I mean, there's some brilliant sources of information out there. The best £36 that anybody can spend is the subscription to Ethical Consumer.
Okay, tell us about that.
So Ethical Consumer magazine has been going for a long time now, and they do look-up tables for. And if you subscribe, you can log on and go to all of their databases historically, and it'll tell you everything from your bar of chocolate to your bank to your pension to the dishwasher you buy, everything. And it gives you a ranking table, and they ask about 10 different questions across the broad sustainability agenda, from environmental impact to child labour to, investments in arm companies, etc. And, we can't all necessarily afford to go right to the top and do the right thing in all of those, but we can all lift ourselves up from the bottom and start to move up those tables. And that's then we're all doing this little bit more sustainable life. And that then encourages those companies, because the good companies get a bit more money coming into them. We buy their products or services, which then displaces from the others. I mean, there's a bank at the bottom of the list called Barclays, and they were the bank of apartheid, and they are the bank of climate change.
They are the bank of climate change.
Yeah, they're the biggest investors. There, the last time I looked on Ethical Consumer, right there at the bottom was Barclays.
Yeah.
So we can just move up, and the thing that will happen is Barclays, they haven't shown any major signs of wanting to change since their apartheid funding days. But if we move our money away from them, and it is our money.
Absolutely.
We all have this opportunity in our lives. We all have a certain amount of expenditure, and it's hard. And I know, to a certain extent, you could say, "Oh, that's like a comfy middle class thing to say," but we can make little bits of difference. We can, and then again, look after the things that we have. Repair shops. I just dropped my wetsuit over at Bodyline for another repair. Well, we should go back to companies that repair and create the skills and the jobs, and we don't need to own a television. All televisions used to be rented through companies called radio rentals on our high streets.
Yeah.
So none of us owned televisions. We watched television, but the company we pay them a monthly fee, and they would look after our television, and then they would take it away and probably repair it. We've been conned into the fact that we have to own a new television. And even that the television's made obsolete. changes the dynamic of a company if you just were renting.
Yeah, absolutely. This is something that's being talked about more and more at the moment. Is how this can be rolled out and how it can happen, isn't it?
Yeah. I was talking to Matt Barr from Looking Sideways, who does other podcasts, and he's done that one, The Announcement, which is a
fantastic.
brilliant bit of journalism. And in there he says, this capitalism hasn't always been the way. It's like there could be another way that we live. Runaway, mass consumer-based capitalism doesn't have to be the model, and probably when we look back in 100 years' time, it won't be. We will have worked our way through this. And when I kind of do talks, I often start with a picture of I always start with a picture of my gran and granddad 102 years ago on their wedding day. And I say, in the 1.9 billion people living on the face of the planet then, there's 8.2 now. And if you showed them the world in which we live, it would scare the hell out of them.
For sure.
They wouldn't be able to, computers, what we're doing now, all of this, technology, our transport systems, everything, they'd be completely freaked out. If you dropped us into the future by 100 years, we'd be completely freaked out. And some of the solutions that will have been put in place will be to questions that we won't even have answered yet. In something like 1992, one of SAS's members rang up, and said, I bought sas.org.uk for you. And we put the phone down and went,
what
the hell does that mean?
What was he saying?
What's he on about? And that's how quickly time moves.
So that leads me really nicely on to the next question about technology.
Yeah.
And, everyone's going on about AI and, social media. And are we doing too much technology? Is technology helping us? Is it hindering us? What are your thoughts on that?
A lot of our solutions will come from technology, but we just haven't got our relationship sorted out with it. We all spend way too much time on our phones and not talking to each other.
Absolutely. Yeah.
There was a woman on the TV, on the radio today, talking about how she's the head teacher for a school, and she's literally, they lock up all the phones. You're allowed to carry your phone around, but you can't access it for 6 hours in the day. And her pupils, who first of all were going, this is awful, we must have the phone, they're now thanking her for giving them 6 hours of pressure off, where you can talk to people, you can study, you can read, you can go for a walk, and there isn't that constant pressure. And we just haven't learned what our relationship is with this kind of thing. And one of the other things, we need to understand, how to use stuff. So, AI is a classic example. If we want to learn how to, if I want to look up a recipe to cook, say, I don't know, fish pasta or something, then my best bet is to search for it on a search engine and just go, I'll either go probably, BBC Food or Jamie Oliver, whatever. That's my most direct route. If I ask AI the same question, it'll search the whole web and come back with the same recipe as either of those other websites, but the carbon footprint will have been about 200 times.
For sure, yeah.
So that's just not understanding how. There's times when we want to go and ask AI how to do really important things, and AI for doing things like scanning for skin cancer or things like that. Amazing application, and it'll solve loads of those problems. But it's a tool for us, and we need to make sure that the right people are in charge of the tool set. That's one of our big challenges.
So what about resilience? You've obviously come up against some pretty big kickback over the years. You've upset some people, in the right direction, but that must be quite draining. How have you coped with that kind of sort of?
There used to be said that I, nicked money from SAS.
Oh right.
And I had a big yacht in the Canaries and used to drive around in a big fat BMW car.
Right.
And my response to that was, have a good look in the mirror, because you're just putting your values on me. I don't do that. Crikey, how people deal with the social media kick of it now, I don't know. I never had that, so I wouldn't get that. It was kind of rumours and things like that. And But we do need to switch off from it. And you have to have good friends around you.
Yeah.
Good family, if you're lucky enough to have a good family around you. And that's about being, respectful, being part of your community.
How much of it is community?
An awful lot. And I think our future, the way that we will be more community-based, where we learn, the word love again. And that, loving our planet, loving and respecting each other, irrespective of the colour of our skin or where we come from or our beliefs. We're okay in this world. So I think those bits are really, really important. And that allows you to have some form of resilience. And also speaking truth for other people as well. If you hear something that's, a maliciously gossipy rumour, challenge it.
Yeah,
I did this really strongly recently for a friend of mine. I heard some awful things being said and I stepped in because you need to. Don't go with the flow because it's the easiest option.
Absolutely.
Stand true.
Absolutely. So what gives you hope, Chris?
Going surfing.
Absolutely.
Going, walking on Dartmoor again, like if you want to recharge your batteries.
Yeah.
And time, I think time, I plant trees every year. And I was saying this when I was closing this conference a week ago. There's a brilliant Greek proverb, and it says, a society becomes great when old men plant trees in whose shade they'll never sit.
Yeah.
And metaphorically speaking, that's what we have to do. We have to go off and build this future and create that. And what gives me hope is going to things like this, the science park that I went to and did a talk for them on Earth Day, and seeing all these people with new companies and new, pushing people with bringing the genius of them and their energy to it and their learning, and then going, the vinyl flooring recycling awards, something that you never even knew existed, but makes you go, wow. And that in every sector, there's people doing brilliant things. And we just need to kind of make sure that all those stories, all those grains of sand are being told, and that we understand that we are the 89%.
Yeah.
We do, the 1 or 2% who are supporting the 11% are trying to tell us, the 89%, that we're not here.
Yeah.
We are here. You and I are sitting here now.
Yeah.
With Alex backing us up,
Absolutely.
doing, on a Friday afternoon, having
with the sun shining.
Sun shining and a little bit of revolutionary chat, and revolution can be peaceful. It doesn't have to be violent. We're more intelligent.
Well,
we use every tool that has been used to create this mad, crazy version of the world in which we live, and we use them for the right. And we do that with all of our belief. We got the right on our side. We have to do that.
Yeah, that's right. That's beautiful. Thank you, Chris.
That's an absolute pleasure.
Next up, we have got your top tips.
Okay.
So what we're going to do, we're going to have a bit of fun here. Alex has got the bell over there.
Okay.
You've got a minute to talk
on
about each of these top tips. And are you ready, Alex? He's just setting his stopwatch there.
Okay.
Are you ready, Chris?
Yeah, if I can come in under 1 minute, what happens?
You get a bell.
Okay.
If you can't, you get a bell.
Okay, lovely.
Do we need to get prizes? Maybe we'll get prizes. Maybe
fine.
I'll get you a bar of chocolate. Oh,
no, I had one.
So the first one, here we go. Do your carbon footprint, know your impact.
Yeah, so carbon footprint, a lot of people diss carbon footprints and say, that was just a ploy by BP in the oil industry to put the guilt on us. Not true. It was invented, first time it was ever said was on BBC Food. But if we know our carbon footprint, then we know where it comes from. We can go, it does come from these companies, and it's empowering. So that allows us to then make decisions as to who we buy, where we consume our products from, because we ask them what the carbon footprint is. And I was even looking for someone about flights. You can if you need to fly, I try to fly as little as possible. But you can see now they're going, this flight is 12% less carbon than the other. So we can make those decisions around our carbon footprint. Knowledge is power.
Perfect. That was almost sort of, you've been practicing, haven't you? You've been at home rehearsing.
No.
Number 2, subscribe to Ethical Consumer. Get informed and vote with your wallet.
Yeah, so I mentioned Ethical Consumer before, £36 a year for a subscription. You can then look into anything on their database. And, if you earn £25,000 a year, let's say, and you work for 40 years, that's £1 million. So there's £3 million just sitting in this room, just the three of us. So that starts to be a lot of power. And it's not that you spend all of that ethically, but you can start to spend some of it ethically. And that's leaning into that space. The power is in our pocket.
And the more you do, I guess.
Absolutely. And the more you do, the more options become available to you, because you're encouraging those good companies to come through. We've beaten the bell.
How about that? Travel less, stay longer, slow down and lower your emissions.
So the travel less, stay longer is a quote from when all of the travel and carbon footprint came through. They asked this there was a joint statement from the editors and owners of Lonely Planet and Rough Guide, and they came up with that statement. Travel less, stay longer. Don't do these short flights everywhere. And what was the second bit of it? Slow down. Generally slow down. We can all slow down. Just slow down our consumption. Just stop and breathe. Appreciate what it is that you're eating or where you are. You don't have to get up and go and do something else immediately. You'll feel better.
Go on, carry on.
Probably have a better life.
There you go. So one of my favourite facts is that slower animals live longer.
Yeah,
and I think that's a beautiful thing. That's a great metaphor for life. Look after stuff, repair, reuse, and respect what you have.
Okay, so absolutely buy it so that it can be repaired. So ask, when you buy something, can that be repaired? And at the end of its life, can it therefore be recycled? And we don't need, we're incredibly lucky to be able to what we have. We were talking earlier, we only had one surfboard when we were young. Like now you see, some people, they're kind of aged 15 or 18 and they're going, I've got my, short board and my long board and my other quiver. And, you're incredibly lucky to have that.
You can only surf one at a time.
You only surf one at a time. Make it a kind of general thing. But appreciate how lucky we are to have that. And we are the lucky ones, absolutely. We've got a roof over our heads, we'll be warm, and we'll eat well tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. Good timing. This last one, I love this one. Love people, connection drives action.
So we do. We are connected to each other. We're humans. We're the social animal. We've got this ability to speak and hear and see and communicate, and it allows us, if we meet someone we needed water and we walked into a village and somewhere on the planet, the person would probably give you water and some food and look after you, even though you couldn't speak a word. And if we love people and respect and try and understand everybody else's community, we'll realize that we do, all 8.2 billion of us, live on this small little spinning globe, and every one of us, our futures and our well-being is completely linked with that of everybody else.
That's an incredible thing, isn't it? Incredible. So next up, Chris, we're going to look at your bits of evidence.
Yep.
And the first one that you've got, once again, you've got a minute.
Okay.
Okay, don't go over. No, the first one that you've given us is the Green Consumer Guide.
Okay, so this was a John Elkington publication, and it was published, I think, in 1987, and it was a bit of a kind of a blueprint. You could look up what the impact of what you were buying, and that what you therefore can do with your wallet. And he was challenged when he first did it. he was legally challenged by McDonald's, and he had to go and get legal advice, and he basically fronted it out with them. But yeah, the Green Consumer Guide and tools like it. How do we spend our money? And it is our money. We can be green consumers.
Absolutely, and that's there's quite a few books out now quite similar to that, isn't there?
Yeah,
excellent. The next one, I'm interested about this one. This is Tickling Sharks.
So, crikey, this sounds like a John Elkington fan club. Tickling Sharks is, in fact, probably Green Consumer Guide has been subsumed by Ethical Consumer. But Tickling Sharks is his life story, and it's just a great read of how just an ordinary person goes into some of the biggest boardrooms and biggest areas of influence with that spirit, and he's still laughing, and he wants the next 15 years. He wants to be around for. He's 75 now. He wants to be around for the next 15 years because he reckons there's going to be more change, some of it not necessarily for good, in the next 10 years than his entire rest of his career. And it's just a joy, and he's a very mischievous, fun man. He's a joy, and it's a great book.
Excellent. I'll have a look out for that one. The next one we've got is the House of Commons Select Committee Report on Sewage, 1997 to 1998.
So this is a report that we were called to go and give oral evidence. So we submitted written evidence, and then on the basis of that, we, as Surfers Against Sewage, were asked to go and give evidence. So we put suit and tie on, went and sat in front of the Select Committee up in London. And when it came out, we were one of only 12 organisations. We were the only non-governmental organisation giving evidence. And when I picked up the press embargoed copy in Whitehall the day before it was published, I opened it up to the conclusion, and it stated that all sewage should be treated to tertiary levels at all times in all places. And I literally was whooping down the street. I stopped a member of the general public and I had to read it to someone because I was on my own. I went, this is brilliant, read this.
Amazing.
Yeah, and that shows what a bunch of kind of determined, tribe of determined people can do. We can do the right thing.
That's awesome. Incredible. This is John Elkington for Triple Bottom Line Thinking and Systems Change. So I guess we've sort of already done that.
Yeah. No, we've done John Elkington.
This is you being a super fan.
Yeah, so I was blasting through my notes there, wasn't? So you pulled this from the notes, yeah?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So the last one we've got is the Big C team.
Yeah.
And the current SAS crew.
Yeah, the Big C and what they've done in relation to where our wetsuits come from.
Tell us about that.
So our wetsuits are made of generally of a material called neoprene. Don't believe it. Neo is just a word to make it sound like new, nice. It's chloroprene, chlorine. That's what it's made of, and it causes cancer. The cancer levels of the people who live around, and they are generally black Americans in South USA, and it's 50 times the levels of cancer than the rest of America.
This is in the air?
It's just being discharged into the air, yeah. And that's kind of where our wetsuits, the material that our wetsuits have been made of. And there is an alternative. It's called Ulex or other natural rubbers. And there is an alternative to this. And the guys, Lewis, Chris and Demi, have done this amazing job of making this amazing film, The Big C, and are out touring with it. And there's a great quote from, I think it's the marketing director of Excel, that says, the film that changed an industry.
Yeah, I understand that. I haven't actually seen the film. You went last week to see it?
I'd seen it before I was away last week, but I've seen it a couple of times.
Yeah, I was due to go and see it, but unfortunately I couldn't. But I'm looking forward to seeing that, definitely. Yeah. And then just
oh, and the Surfers Against Sewage. I was
going to say, this is important. Let's have a minute for them.
So, the team of people who get up every day and go and work for Surfers Against Sewage, all the volunteers, all the people who've ever supported it, whether it be paying their £2 membership, paddling, doing a sponsor.
It's probably not £2 anymore.
It's probably not now. But all of those people who just believed that we could make a difference.
Yeah.
And the amazing team who are there now, continuing that fight to protect our oceans, to make sure that, that those who want to pollute it are held to account and challenged. if they weren't there, it would be a lot easier for those polluters. So even though it might feel like it's a hell of a game and a hell of a challenge, SAS are doing a great job.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris, brilliant. Tell us where we can find you and A Grain of Sand.
So AGOS, www.agos.co.
Okay.
That's my website. Needs updating drastically. And my email is chris@agos.co.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Oh, one more question before we go. If we could do one thing today to make a better tomorrow, what would it be?
Engage people in conversations. Just talk to people. I had one just as I was leaving to come here. I drove the car down the track, and I know it's really dusty from our house, and I went really slowly, and there was this guy walking down there, and I could have just gone woof and left him in a cloud of dust, but I went really slowly, and then as I crept past him, I went, I'm just driving slowly just so I don't engulf you in a cloud of dust, and he went, right on, mate. And I'd never met him before. But we can do that in all aspects of our life. Talk to someone on a train or a train station, or we can be the community. Let's be human again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's have some love and respect and laughs and engagement.
That's a beautiful thing, Chris. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's a
great pleasure to have royalty in the
Not
house
royalty,
today.
No, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
And we didn't talk about it just very quickly before we finish up. You were given an MBE by the Queen there, weren't you?
Yeah.
And, tell me about this.
Yeah, so I'm not a royalist, and so the first thing I did was to ask my very, very good friend Solomon. I said, what do you reckon, I should take this or not? And so Solomon's of Jamaican descent,
right.
And he went, that's not your battle here, Chris. Take it and go and do bloody good with it and use it like kick. But for me, it stands for Moaning Bloody Environmentalist. and I got that because of the amazing team. It's on behalf of the team and everybody from Surfers Against Sewage. It's kind of SAS that got given, it should be S on the end, Moaning Bloody Environmentalists.
Well, you're a moaning bloody environmentalist that's done a hell of a good job of it. So once again, thank you for everything you've done with Surfers Against Sewage. Thank you for everything you've done for the planet. And thank you for coming on this afternoon.
Thank you.
That's it for this episode of Searching for a Greener Room. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Let us know what you think, who you'd like to hear from, any topics you want us to cover. Drop us a comment. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode. See you next time.